Good evening and welcome to Northern Kentucky History Hour. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are going to spend the next couple of minutes getting everyone into the event who is joining us via Zoom, and we will be back with you momentarily. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Northern Kentucky History Hour. We're so glad to have you with us, whether you're joining via Zoom or joining via Facebook Live, or maybe you're watching this a long time from now on our YouTube channel. Either way, we're glad to have you, and we're going to spend just the next couple of minutes letting everyone in. Glad to see you all on this sunny spring day. And you will notice that your microphone will be muted, and even though you're muted, we really want you to participate in the conversation if you're joining us live. So you can add comments in the chat, you can add comments on Facebook, and you can ask questions. So if you have a question, I'll be recording those throughout the presentation, and then we will be able to ask those at the end. All right, so I think we've got pretty much everybody via Zoom. And so I'd like to kick off and say once again, for those who have just joined us, welcome to Northern Kentucky History Hour. My name is Tara Johnson-Nome, and I will be your host tonight on behalf of Behringer-Crawford Museum. History Hour is a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum, and we're so glad to have you with us on this 40th episode of Northern Kentucky History Hour. It's been a really educational and fun year learning about Northern Kentucky history. And just a few housekeeping items before we get started in introducing our guests tonight. So as I said a minute ago, but we've had a few people join, feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat. I'll collect all of those and ask them at the end. There will be a quiz question. If you hear that there's a quiz coming, get your fingers ready for the keyboard because it goes quick. The first one, or maybe two if it's a tie with the right answer, will win our prize, bragging rights, obviously, and also a Northern Kentucky History Hour pin. So good luck. And I look forward to it. I don't know ever what the quiz question is either, so I always try to guess myself. So fun times. Want to say thank you to all the Behringer-Crawford Museum staff and my fellow trustees. I'm on the board of trustees for the museum. I actually have another job that I get paid for. I just do this for fun. But we really appreciate everything that the museum staff and the supporters do. And I do want to say thank you to the financial contributors to the museum. Behringer-Crawford is supported by the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, the Arts Wave, as well as the Kentucky Arts Council and the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, as well as the Carol Ann and Ralph B. Hale Jr. U.S. Bank Foundation, and of course, our members. And many of you have renewed your membership or started a new membership with the museum this year. And this year, more than ever, we appreciate that. The museum is now open. We'd love to see you there at the limited hours. You can go to bcmuseum.org and find out the exact hours, as well as the safety protocols that are in place. And we hope to see you there soon. If you're not a member, think about joining. Again, bcmuseum.org. You can find out how to do that. All right. I think it's time to get started. And I love it when we have two guests. It makes it kind of fun and they can kind of go back and forth. And so we've got a returning guest and we have a new guest. So our returning guest is Janine Crinebrink. And as you all know, she is president and senior archaeologist with K&V Cultural Resources Management. She's a board member of the Friends of Big Bone, a past board member of James A. Ramage Civil War Museum, and archaeologist associate at Behringer-Crawford Museum. Doug VonStrohe, who is her co-presenter, is vice president and staff archaeologist for K&V Cultural Resources Management. So they're business partners. And Doug also supervises public archaeology programs with the Ramage Museum, with Behringer-Crawford Museum, and the Oldham County History Center. So Doug and Janine, welcome. We are so happy to have you this evening.
Thanks. We're really glad to be here. I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. There. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, it looks good. If you want to go to slideshow and say show, yep, that's it right there. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are really happy to be here. And one of the reasons we wanted to do the talk this month is that this is the 10th anniversary of our starting K&V Cultural Resources. We started in March 2011. Hard to believe it's been 10 years, but it has. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things. It's going to be pretty much of a whirlwind tour. So hopefully everybody won't get dizzy. What I want to say first is the things we're not going to talk about. So we're not going to talk about Civil War. We are not going to talk about Big Bone Lick or urban archaeology, because I already talked about those last year. And as Tara and I were talking before, you can go watch those on the YouTube channel or Behringer-Crawford's page anytime you want. So we're not going to talk about those, even though they are some of my favorite sites or projects. We're also not going to talk about Devou Park, because hopefully we're going to be scheduling a Devou Park talk sometime in the next month or two. We'll talk to Tara about that. We're going to talk about a lot of other fun and maybe odd or interesting things over the next 45 or 50 minutes. I do need to point out our little friend here that was in the publicity shot. She was kind of a mascot. That's a little doll head from Covington. So, but we're not really going to talk about Covington. So we'll get to some other fun things. So we thought first we would talk a little bit about what we do, just take a couple of minutes and run through a couple of definitions, because I don't really do that a lot in the other talks, and we thought it might be a good opportunity to do that just for a few minutes. We are K&V Cultural Resource Management, and we do archaeology consulting for development, for cities, municipalities, sewer, water line work, that sort of thing. We do archaeology. We also do historic architecture and historic research, National Register nominations, those kinds of things. And we're very interested in public archaeology. Obviously, I've been doing it for for a very long time, since 1981, and Doug has been working on volunteer public archaeology since 2005. So we want to talk just briefly about what we do in archaeology, and archaeology is actually part of anthropology, and we study human cultures through looking at the material objects people leave behind. Well, the small things are called artifacts, and those are anything that's changed or created by a person. They're portable, can be moved or worn easily. There's some interesting dishes there. I don't know if that's your left or right, but you can see the dishes. Matching patterns of cups and saucers. That'll be a site we will talk about this evening. And the other prehistoric artifacts include bladelets in the top row right here, and other artifacts. And these are from a site in Kenton County, very interesting one that we will also talk about this evening. Features are what we call the large, complex, non-portable objects that we find in the ground. Here's a few examples of prehistoric. There's a dog burial that Doug's going to talk about this evening, a fire cooking pit, and another prehistoric storage pit over here on the bottom. A couple of historic features. This is actually from the Civil War Museum. It's part of the fortification over there. This is a stone-lined well that we actually found out in the middle of a field. completely buried under the plow zone. So those are some examples of features. And I'm going to give you another nice big shot, overview shot. This is, all right, Doug, where is this?
That is Camp Sherman. It's on, I believe that's Route 35 up on the north side of Chillicothe, before you get to the first prison that's on the right. ODOT was doing a job. I think they were moving a road or something over, and so we were part of a contract to go in and look for. I believe we had the bakery. That most of that was part of the bakery and firehouse, and that was before we had everything uncovered. And I think we ended up finding at least pieces of 2 barracks. But yeah, we moved a lot of dirt up there, and it was neat seeing the foundations. I'm not sure if anybody can see, but in the center, towards the top, some of that soil is actually burned red from the bakeries. There was 3 main ovens in the bakery, and that soil was pretty bright red up there.
And for scale, you see cars and then some little tiny people, one of which is probably Doug working right over there. So an archaeological site then is anywhere people have been and left physical evidence behind. It could be one artifact, it could be a whole city, or in this case, a World War I training camp, which is what Camp Sherman was. All right, here's some words, and then I'll have some pictures. So this is what we do every day on a day-to-day basis. We do archaeology and architecture for developers, cities, utilities, and other clients before they build on a property. If they get federal funds or permits for that project, then they hire us to go out and try to find whether there's anything historically significant before they develop. And we divide this into 3 parts. So we have discovery, evaluation, and mitigation, which is excavation. And from now on, we're going to highlight some of our favorite and maybe some interesting and maybe odd things that we've seen or found. I've got a few on here that are older than the company. There are some things I had done before that are some of my favorites. Well, if my down button would work. Here we go. All right. This is phase 1, discovery, where we're looking on the ground surface or digging what we call little shovel tests to go out and find archaeological sites. Evaluation is we're in a plowed field. We're going to use heavy equipment to uncover different features. This is a chimney. Turns out to be a chimney, and these are little pit cellars under a building. And then phase 3 is mitigation, where we're going to go back and excavate some, usually not all, but a good percentage of an archaeological site to try to uncover what might be there that would be of interest. All right, now we'll get into some fun stuff. All right, my first project is a little bit older adventure that I had, and I'm calling this From the Weird. And that looks like a horse, and it is definitely a horse. So I got a phone call one day from a friend who is a forensic anthropologist, and she said, "Do you want to do something a little bit different?" And I said, "Sure." And turns out she had a court order to exhume a horse. It was only dead about 18 months. And I can't tell you where it is because I don't know the result of the court case. But suffice it to say, this was a Tennessee walking horse, died under suspicious circumstances. And it took the owner of the horse 18 months to get a court order. And you can see how big the hole is. So the place where the horse had been boarded dug this big hole and buried the horse. And unbeknownst to us, there's actually a second horse in the same burial pit. So we had to uncover this poor horse that was still fresh. And we don't have smell-o-vision. If we had smell-o-vision, you could get a really good idea. Doug is making faces. think of the dead thing you might have found in the backyard, and that's kind of where you are, only worse. We threw away a lot of the equipment, but
Chris kept one shovel in his car from that, and for weeks we were kind of wondering what that smell was until he realized one of those shovels was still in his car. So
this is Chris right here, and there I am. So that was quite an experience, and we made Chris cut the poor horse up into pieces because they couldn't get it out in one piece, so we had to literally saw it into pieces. So that's probably the weirdest project I've ever worked on. So we're going to go from the weird to the truly historic. And I will ask if, and you don't have to answer in the chat, but oops, back up. If anyone has been to the Underground Railroad Freedom Center in downtown Cincinnati, and this is the slave jail that is the centerpiece of that museum. And I was lucky enough to get to do the archaeology on the slave jail. And when we first went down there, which was, first time I went there was 1999, and we worked on it for the next 5 years through up into 2004, which is when the Freedom Center opened. This tobacco barn, the slave jail is inside the tobacco barn. And we first went out there, we went inside, and it's like, okay. And you can't really tell, we'll give a close up. There are bars on the windows. The chimney's been removed. Here, the chimney's gone. So we did excavations around the building while it was still inside the barn, and then it was dismantled and taken down, and then we did a complete excavation all around the slave pen. And these are some of the ceramics that we found, 1831 penny, a bone handle, and a spoon and a fork, for example. This, we don't have time to talk about it. One of the things I was going to mention earlier is if you hear us give you a quick overview of a site or a project you're really interested in, tell us in the chat. Maybe we can schedule a whole hour to talk about it during a future history hour, because the Anderson slave pen is really fascinating. Here are some other shots. You can see the barred windows inside the building, and here's a mark on one of the bars. G&J Hillenberger from Pittsburgh, and they went into business in 1832. So that gives us a date for the bars on the windows. All right, so the building was built between 1800 and 1810 as a house. It was domestic first, and then there's a gap in the domestic artifacts, and then they pick up again after the 1830s. There's very little archaeological evidence for it as a slave pen, except for that gap in the domestic artifacts and a gap in the flat glass, in the window glass, because it had windows with glass, and then they had barred windows, and then we think it had glass again later. A man named John W. Anderson bought the property in 1825. His parents lived in the house, and then after his parents died in 1831, he converted the building to a slave pen where he would buy people from his neighbors, and he would gather people and take them to New Orleans and to Natchez, Mississippi, and sell them in the slave trade. So he was a slave trader, and he operated out of this property for about 9 years. We have documents, tax documents, court cases, because he didn't like to pay his bills. So when he died suddenly in 1834, all of the people he had been doing business with filed lawsuits against his estate. So there's a remarkable collection of court documents. So in the conclusions, Anderson was a prosperous man, but a very risky business partner, which is good for us historically. He built a brick house on the property, and then he converted the log building into a jail or a pen. And it's a very powerful statement on slavery in the Ohio Valley. And if you get a chance to get over to the Freedom Center, if you haven't been, I encourage you to go. It's fascinating. fascinating project and a fascinating place. And I'd love to be able to talk about it for an hour. And now it's Doug's turn to talk about one of his favorite sites in Claremont County. Doug, just tell me what.
Yeah, I think this was back in 2008, going maybe into 2009. We had a job for I believe it was a high pressure natural gas line, and they were gonna bore this line from the Ohio side over to the Kentucky side. And the field that we were in is real close to Neville and Moscow, that area. And a lot of times along the major waterways, especially the Ohio River and all the other smaller rivers, there's a really good chance of running into prehistoric sites. And in this case, didn't really matter where they put their line through the field, they were going to hit a site. And so they chose the spot that was best for them to get their pipeline across. And we went ahead and basically excavated in the area that they were going to impact. And this was a late Archaic site, and we had a lot of artifacts on the surface, and I believe I did dig some shovel tests, probably went 15, maybe even 10 meter intervals, and just to try to get boundaries on the site. And then once they had figured out exactly where they were putting their gas line corridor, we ended up excavating about 6 5x5 meter trenches, and then we did some deep trenching to see if there was any buried deposits beneath what we were seeing. And this site turned out to be really interesting. We had we hired a UK to come up and do remote sensing. It should be on the next slide.
There you
go. So the top picture there are the results from some of the remote sensing. I believe it was the gradiometer. And all the dark shadows that are coming up, the geophysicists had circled some in red, some in blue, and they kind of figure out, hey, we think these are real, these aren't. All the ones that they suspected were metal, I went out with the metal detector and actually hit all of them. And one of them was actually a Craftsman screwdriver, which I just used the other day. So they were only, things like that were only a few inches below the topsoil. So I had to number each one of those shadows up there, or anomalies. And then I had to strategically place my trenches over top of them to inspect to see if they are prehistoric in nature or historic in nature, and if they would provide us any context to the site. And so we had the 6 5x5s, and the real interesting thing about this site was you see some of the bigger, darker shadows up along the top right and then the bottom left. Some of those, at that scale, they look like they should be 2-3 meters in size, almost in diameter in size, which is really big. And with the first scrape of the track hoe, if I'm going down 25-30 centimeters, I expected to see it, especially if it was a fire pit, if there had been some intense burning, and the top of the subsoil had nice carpet of fire-cracked rock, which is just rock that has been heated. A lot of times it turns red. In this case, it was mostly river cobbles. They break in an angular pattern, and it was just a carpet of this fire-cracked rock. But I didn't necessarily have all the features that showed up in the remote sensing results. And so we did some test units, I believe, in the corners of some of the trenches. And after another 20 centimeters of what seemed to be subsoil was another intact layer of occupation, where there had been an older occupation, probably multiple flooding episodes over top of that, and then the stuff that we were finding at 30 centimeters down. So basically I had to do this phase 2 twice. So once we scraped over a 5x5, we would have to do it again to get to the lower features. And these are what some of the features look like. Not all of them were real spectacular. And so when we deal with these features, a lot of times they're circular, oblong, more regular looking than, say, the base of a tree. And what we do is bisect them and you see the tape measure going across. We have string going across. One side we might cut out the window because we want to get a view of the profile, which is looking at the edge of it. So we cut it down through the center, and you can see the profile in the soil. That's mapped, photographed, and descriptions written down on our paperwork. And we have forms for trenches, units, and the forms have forms that we have to document just completely. Because you only get to dig a site once. You don't, you know, if you don't document it the first time, it doesn't get documented at all. So all these forms, and then doing it step by step, and it's a slow and painful, but it's methodical. And so these are some of the examples of the features. A lot of them might just be post molds to where they could have been associated with a structure, or they could have been fire pits, storage pits that they had dug to put something in. And then next slide, please.
I'm trying to.
And in some of these features, we will screen that half that's dug out, we will screen, and then the other half we usually bag and try to do a soil sample, like in a flotation device, and you end up with recovering artifacts that way. These are some of the points these are the diagnostic tools that we found out of that site. Now, we found hundreds of little flakes and pieces. Some people call them chips. We found hundreds of those. And of course, all the fire cracked rock had to be counted and weighed. And, but these are some of the neater pieces. And when they come from a feature, if you get enough charcoal out of there, I believe you need to get at least 10 grams. They prefer 20 grams of charcoal. You can send that off to someone who does carbon-14 dating, and they can come back with dates on you. And it's nice to have diagnostic tools to stay in line with your dates. And you can see some of we did a phase 2 and phase 3 down there, and these are some of the dates that we have. And they mostly range in the late Archaic period, which is pretty much 3,000 years to what, 7,000 years old, roughly. You get some transition periods in there too, but these are some of the typical tools in this area of that time period that you'll see. 3501, that's interesting. That's actually not a projectile point, but that's actually a drill. And then some of the real small points are interesting because I don't think that was a very long technology. I think they're called Merrim Trimbles, and they are significantly smaller than most of the other points from the late Archaic time period. I believe that's 80.01 is probably 1.5 centimeters long, probably maybe 2. 64.01 actually still has its point on the top of it, which is nice, and it's probably 2.5 centimeters max. And then some of the other ones, they're not too impressive. It kind of makes you wonder if they didn't eat a lot of nuts and berries, because their points don't seem real sharp, but evidently they got the job done. But these are typical points in the late Archaic sites, and you would find these in northern Kentucky as well.
All right. In the radiocarbon dates, right, Doug, the top 2 are from the upper level and the bottom 2 are from the lower level of features.
Yeah, when we did basically had to do each excavation twice, because you've got those tops and levels, and everything was situated right. If you can imagine a cake, you know, newer stuff is on top, and further down you get should be older. If it's not like that, if it turns out to be backwards or turned upside down, your site's disturbed already.
All right. All right, so my turn now. Another prehistoric site. So we're calling this section, "What's that doing here?" Sites in unexpected places. These particular artifacts were found in Kenton County. These are bladelets. Here, long, very sharp blades that are commonly found during the Middle Woodland Hopewell time period. And we'll get to the next slide that'll show a distribution of that. And some pottery. and these were found in Kenton County. And these are related to the time period with Miami Fort over here at the mouth of the Great Miami. Another one called Oberding right across the hill there. Over on the Little Miami, we have Turner Earthworks and the Milford Earthworks, all very famous Middle Woodland Hopewell earthworks. We know that there were earthworks in downtown Cincinnati, quite a few actually. There are several reported also from Covington, although we're not sure if they're from the earlier Adena or Hopewell. And then here's our little site over here, Mill Hills. It is the only site in all of Kenton and Campbell County with artifacts from this time period. And there are only 4 sites in Boone County with bladelets from this time period. And that includes the Rogers site, which is my master's thesis site, which is down here opposite Lawfree Creek. So what's it doing here? And we could certainly spend a long time talking about this as well, but our hypothesis is that they were on their way to or from one of these other earthworks. The bladelets are highly associated with these time periods. And in fact, when the Hopewell time period ends, nobody makes bladelets anymore. So they're very associated. So somebody up here was either visiting or traveling to and from. We don't think they were living there. We didn't find fire pits or cooking pits or evidence of houses. We think this was a campsite where people would stop repeatedly on their way to or from. So very, very interesting site that doesn't really make any sense except in that context. So that's another very interesting one. Another one, this one we just finished actually, and we're calling it Zerubbabel's Earthfast House. So I'm not sure if anyone knows what that is. That's not our trivia question. We'll get to that in a minute, but this is a little cabin. That picture that you saw earlier that I said was a fireplace and pit cellars, they're actually under this little house. And an earthfast house is built with corner posts. If you think of a pole barn or a building that has posts on the corners, that's what this house was. It was not a log house. It wasn't made out of horizontal logs. They put vertical posts inside post holes that they lined with rocks. So the post would sit up on the corners, and you would put your boards probably horizontally to make your walls. And this was built sometime around early 1820s, which is very late for this type of house. It's very well known over in the very Northeast, up in New England, and also down into Virginia in the 1600s and 1700s. So to have one of these in Southwest Ohio that was built in the 1820s is very, very unusual. And in fact, it's one of only 2 known in all of Ohio. This is Zerubbabel's spoon, Z-E-W, a pewter spoon that we found in this pit cellar. We could talk about Zerubbabel all day long. He had a brother David, and they fought in court for about 5 years before Zerubbabel died. So it's a fascinating story, which also would be fun to talk about. Here's a shot just of us up there clearing dirt over top of the features. Oh, hey, Josh, I know you're on here. And various other people, James on here too. And Allie and Andrea. They all are people that have worked for us that are watching tonight. All right, come on. There we go. Here's an overview shot showing some of the different features that we've been working on and how in the summertime, especially, we set up tents to try to keep cool a little bit, keep the sun off of us and give us some shade. So, as I said, there's only 2 of these known in Ohio. This is a picture that somebody drew of a site in Virginia for what it might have looked like. Ours had a stone chimney, not a brick chimney, but just a little house with posts on the corners. This one ours had windows because we do have window glass. Now, structurally, they're similar, and we're going to have a house here in a little while that we're going to talk about. It's very similar or maybe related to what are called braced frame houses, which are houses where there are horizontal beams, or angled beams and vertical wood posts that make up the house. Some of these early houses have brick built in between the posts, and this is called nogging. And it's also an early style, but we do see them around here in the early 19th century. And so we're wondering if maybe that it has something to do with that. And we'll come back to that in a little while. All right, so we're going to shift our focus now to some of our our interesting volunteer projects where we have been doing public archaeology for a very long time around the region in northern Kentucky especially, and over toward Bedford, Kentucky for the Oldham County History Center. And these are some examples of different projects through Behringer-Crawford that I had worked on over the years. And now for our trivia question. So I have conducted field schools with Behringer-Crawford at this place that's in this picture many years ago. We did multiple sessions there. So the trivia question is, what is this and where is it? So those of you who, I've lost my ability right now to look at the chat because I didn't get out a full screen soon enough, but I'll let Tara keep track of the answers and we'll come back to it in a little while, but it lets you get a good look at that. But that's our trivia question is, what is this and where is it? All right, so everybody's got a good look at it. And I think, Doug, I think you're up next.
Yes.
Okay, Doug, you're up.
All right, so this is the Bibb Gatewood site in Trimble County, Kentucky. It's really, the town is Bedford, and that's located pretty much halfway between Carrollton and LaGrange over on 42, to give you a little more reference point. And through the Oldham County History Center, which would be the next county, or maybe the second county south, we were invited down back in, well, 2005 is when we first went down to help conduct a survey around this old log cabin that had an addition on it. And we originally had the fields all plowed up, and we did a surface survey where we walked around, we put a little pin flag in wherever we found artifacts. And that's what helps kind of guide us into where we want to put excavation units. So we want to look for densities of artifacts. And it was extremely dense right up against the house there where you can see the tents and all that. And so we started opening up units there, and we kept finding tons and tons of stuff. We eventually uncovered the chimney fireplace and a pit cellar from what we believe is the summer kitchen. And you can see some students working there along the rock chimney base. And then once we uncovered enough on the edge, you could actually see how the rocks from the chimney fell over. Whether it deteriorated or it was pushed over, we're not sure. But it's given us, what now, it'd be 16 years worth of work down there. We do a public dig in April, May. We do a week-long field institute for high school students in July, usually the hottest week of the year. And then we do one in September, and we do one in October. And off and on, we've done public artifact washings, which take place down at LaGrange at the Oldham County History Center. It's open to the public. People can register to go. You just have to do that through the Oldham County History Center. And unfortunately, when I got on site down there back in 2016, I pulled in and the owners had removed the addition to the house, which kind of destabilized it quite a bit. And so we weren't able to actually finish our excavations down around the summer kitchen. We've moved up into the field, but fortunately we have found what we believe might be another outbuilding. Now this site is special because the owner, William Gatewood, back in pre-Civil War, 1830s, I believe, is when the cabin was built. The Gatewood family owned a few slaves, one of which was Henry Bibb, his wife, and his daughter. And Henry Bibb made a name for himself. I'd say he ran away, but actually he ran away quite a few times. In fact, I've lost track how many times he actually got away. But he actually corresponded with Gatewood, trying to situate himself to where he can buy his wife and his daughter back. And unfortunately, he was unsuccessful in those attempts. And Bibb did manage to escape one more time and actually make it to, he went to Michigan, Detroit, I believe, and then crossed over into Canada, where I think he did some schooling up there, and then also started an abolitionist newspaper, and became president of certain African-American societies promoting abolition and the safety of African-Americans, and just and the corresponding, having a literate slave is one thing. And I mean, the information that he left behind, he did an autobiography, all the information he left behind gives you such an intimate look into the struggles that they had, and being able to dig on a site where you might be able to put physical evidence to those resources, to all that information that he left behind. It's really been a lot of fun. And I'm thinking that's why we've been going this long on that site. So, but here the picture with of the cabin without the addition, you can see the how the logs were put together. I believe that was a full dovetail on the corners of the chimney there. Now that door I believe that door was added on, and that's the fireplace, this little stove chimney on the outside there, that brick chimney was actually added on probably with the addition, which we pegged at about the 1920s possibly, judging by how it was framed and all that. And we had been digging right in front of it there too, and unfortunately I wasn't able to finish up to try to find my corners on the summer kitchen, and but that's something we're looking forward to continuing doing. It's really neat that you can see the chinking rocks in between the logs there, and some of the mortar from the walls you can pull off and still see hog hair or horse hair in there that they used as kind of a binder in the mortar to help seal up the walls there.
Yep, I think that's.
Was that it for that one?
I think it is. And now one more, just a general overview shot. This is Nancy Tice. She's the director of the Oldham County History Center.
Yeah, and at that time we're still digging down there. If you can see that low spot down there where we had excavated, that is where the summer kitchen was, and that would be the rear of the house. The front of the house is on the other side. An old road that used to run into downtown Bedford is just off to the right there.
Yeah, back here in the corner.
And the cabin itself is in a lot worse shape now. Once they tore that addition off, it loosened some things, and the roof started falling in, and the whole thing's jolted over. In fact, I believe 2/3 of that brick chimney is on the ground right now.
Yes. Yep. All right. My turn. One of the other ones that I wanted to talk about is the Gaines Tavern in Walton. Some of you may have been there. They've had open houses or driven past it. It's just north of downtown Walton off of US 25. And we were asked to come out and help through a grant project with thanks to Boone County Planning Commission for the help, in the Kentucky Heritage Council. I believe it was a Heritage Council planning grant, and the University of Kentucky, who this guy is from, came up and did some remote sensing as part of the project. COVAS members came out and helped, NKY students and Boone County Preservation Board people. This is the Gaines house, and it was used as a tavern in the early 19th century. And it was already listed on the National Register, but the only thing listed was the house itself. And they really didn't have any idea what was happening in the yard, what other sites or features might have been there. And so we did remote sensing, and then the map's kind of sideways, north is up here. All these little dots are shovel tests. that volunteers dug all the way across the site from south to north. And we found like a trash dump up here. And this is where we did most of the remote sensing. And we found evidence of what we believe was the actual early 19th century tavern site. They had a tavern license there by 1810. And it was also a major stagecoach stop. There's actually a well here that was used during the stagecoach days, that they would water their horses. And we found evidence of a possible barn or stables over here. And you can see all the black dots are ones that had artifacts. And solid cluster back here behind the main building, we're thinking there may have been another building there. And there was definitely another building, early 19th century artifacts over on this particular side of the building. And so what we ended up doing is we rewrote the National Register nomination to include the archaeology. And so now that entire piece of property, that kind of big, long piece of property, is now also listed on the National Register. And because these are the only remnants of the original Gaines property, which was a much larger piece of property. And so this 6.98 acres is all that's left. And so we got the whole thing added to the National Register. And one of the fun things with doing these kinds of volunteer projects is that we get to an end result that is a benefit for local communities. For example, with Doug's project, what is that now called? The National Underground Railroad to Freedom?
Yeah, it's the National Park Service's National Underground Road to Freedom program is what it's called now.
Right, and the BIB site is now listed in that program. And so those kinds of things are very rewarding for us when we work on these projects. Oh, Doug, monkeys, buzzards, and planes. This one's back to you. These are some of the fun things Doug has encountered over the last few years.
Yeah, so I thought, I've now found a boat out in the middle of the woods, like nowhere near a lake, stream, or anything like that. I found a boat. I'm thinking, okay, that's weird. And not 2 projects later, we find records of an airplane. I believe I did look that up. I think it was from the 80s. I think it was just a small little Cessna type airplane, pretty close out to the airport. And the wreckage is still there. The little handheld CB mic is still there, and bits and pieces of the cockpit, like the panels and all that, all the instruments and everything. And then about the picture up in the corner there, I don't know. Somebody's artwork. Some crew members might think it's haunted, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's just, you never know what you're gonna find when you walk out in a project area. You just go with the flow anymore. I don't know.
All right.
Next slide. Usually when people ask me what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen out in the field, and I usually have to go with the monkeys. I was shovel testing. In fact, it was on that pipeline that we had done the phase 2 and phase 3 on down there in Neville. I'm on a further section up in the uplands there in Claremont County, and I'm digging away. And you ever been by yourself where all of a sudden you feel like there's somebody else there with you or watching you or whatever? I got that feeling, and I turned around and there's a monkey, and he's just sitting there looking at me. And now there was a chain link fence, and there was some webbing or some light, some kind of net going up, but I didn't see an actual enclosure. So as far as I was concerned, these monkeys were free range. But the monkey down there in the corner just sat there and watched me the whole time. He had 2 or 3 buddies come out, and they sat there and looked at me and watched what I was doing, and I sat there and watched them right back for a while and dug my holes, and and I left. I figured, if they're not going to help, why hang around? But yeah, that's been the first time and the last time I've seen monkeys in the field.
Next.
And in every barn I think I've ever gone in to see, take pictures and everything, I think it's a rule they have to have a nesting vulture in there, and it can scare the hell out of you sometimes, especially when you're a couple feet away. You turn the corner and then that thing sticks its head out at you. You pretty much feel like it's the last day of your life. And this is just one of many times I've been in an old house or an old barn where just, vultures stick their heads out. I think the key with the vultures is just to stay moving, to let them know that you're not quite dead yet. Next.
All right.
Well, this is in Racine, Ohio. We had a big job that we did. I don't know, we were down in Meigs County for months on end. This would, I don't even remember what year it was. But that is an Indian mound back there. If you can see that rise in the back, it's real level, and then you got that big rise. That is a mound. I think it has, I'm pretty sure it has a site number. And there's a UFO just off to the side. I think I have to credit Melanie Stanbaugh for the photo on this one. I think she's the one who took the photo. But yeah, that's something you don't see every day. And if you do, let us know. Next slide.
Cistern. We do have an urban shot. Can you see it?
Oh yeah, that's cool. So down there, we did a big urban project. You already talked about it there, 11th and Green Up. And when they built the Jacob Price Apartments in the 1930s, instead of removing some of the cisterns underneath the apartment buildings, they filled them with concrete. Shovels in there for scale. That's a normal size shovel. The cisterns were brick lined, and they're usually about 6 foot diameter, probably 10 foot deep. Most of them had a beehive top to them, so it was like a little dome top. And they filled, this was like one of 3 of them, I think. They filled those suckers full of concrete. And I think the construction company had to get a track hoe the size that they used to like haul around 747s and stuff like that. They actually had to go out and get a different piece of equipment just to pull these out of the ground. I'm not even going to estimate how much they weigh, but that's a big plug of concrete right there. And we have excavated cisterns and all that, but we did not do these. We pretty much wrote these off, took pictures of them, and was like, wow. But they used them as kind of piers underneath the buildings. So I guess that's one way of doing it. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. And in this picture, you can still see the brick lining from the cistern stuck to the concrete when they ripped it out.
All right, I think we can move along here time-wise. I don't know if Cindy and Woody are on here anywhere, but here's a picture of the Zimmerman Log House, which they moved and now live in. This house was built before 1810 in Boone County, and we did Behringer-Crawford Field Schools all around this house for several years. That was a very fun project. This is in Anderson Park District, and I've got this one in here because you can see the here. There's the earlier part of this house, and Doug had to turn himself into a pretzel to get up in this little tiny attic. But this house had brick nogging. So it was a braced frame house with the brick in between the vertical upright beams. So very early 19th century. Very, very interesting. Another one, we're just going to skip here through because we're about out of time. This is the Oak Grove Schoolhouse in Walton County, Ohio, just out in the middle of the woods. I mean, we cleared around it, but it was in the middle of the woods. It had been completely forgotten. Warren County Historical Society didn't even know it was there. This is the drawing that Doug and our crew did of the front of the school. And here it is on an 1875 map. That was a fascinating project. Turns out there's a lot more of these little school buildings still out there than anybody knew. All right, so we're kind of at the end. I'll have to escape out of here. I do have a picture to show the answer here in a minute. Oops, can y'all still see it?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how to get back to the chat.
I think if you just want to go to the next one, even in that view is fine.
Okay, so there's our answer. It's the Kenton County Courthouse.
All right.
I'm trying to figure out how to get back to get to the, so I can see the chat.
So if you hit stop share, the green, it might be a red button now. It used to be green.
Okay. All right. So that's the answer.
So we had quite a few of our viewers who guessed the right answer. So well done, everybody. And also we have a ton of questions. So I am going to try to like rapid fire for Janine and Doug. But really quickly, by my calculations, and actually I need to try to figure out if I can see the chat in the on Facebook, but it looks like we did have a couple correct answers on Facebook. I don't think they came in quite as early as Deborah Molman, who did answer the Independence Courthouse, which I think we understand is the same as the Kenton County Courthouse. So great job, Deborah. I will add you to my list of people who need a pin. So let me just write that down really quick. And Deborah, if you want to private message me in the Zoom, your address, that would be super helpful. And I would appreciate it. So, okay, Janine and Doug, are you guys ready? There's every single topic. There's so many cool, great questions. So we're going to kind of start from the top. A couple people wanted to know, including me. So you called it the Anderson slave pen, and I just wanted to make sure because several of us wanted to know where was it originally located.
It was in Mason County. If you're going out the AA highway and you enter Mason County and you go up to the top of the hill, and there's a road off to the right, and you go down that road and it's right by Route 10.
Wow.
So
it gives me chills to think like it really wasn't that far from here.
Oh yeah, it was right out there in the middle of a field.
Okay, well, I have more comments about that, but we'll have to take those offline. So moving on. Okay, and I know that you did end up showing some dates, but when you talked about, I think this was a Doug question, when Doug was talking about the Archaic period, and I know some of the dates were, in the like 4,000 BC, like 1,000 BC-ish time frame. Can you just kind of help those of us that are not thinking about these time periods on a regular basis, maybe like what cultures would maybe have overlaid with that would have created those points? And I know they weren't all arrowheads; they were different kinds of points.
Right. Generally around here, we're talking. Your earliest would be your Paleo period, which is. They do fluctuate as people find new stuff. I think we generally go with 13,000 years old, or
10 or 11.
10 or 11. I've seen up to 13. It's probably still pending on carbon dates and all that stuff. But you, so your first period would be your Paleo period, and then you'd get into the Archaic period, which gets broken down to early Archaic, middle Archaic, late Archaic. Early Archaic would be from 9,000 years down to 6,000 or 7,000, and then you get your middle Archaic for 2,000 or 3,000 years in there, and then you get your late Archaic, which is about 3,000 years old and up to 5,000, and then you get early woodland, middle woodland, late woodland, and then late prehistoric. Your Florida ancients and all that. We split them up pretty good, generally in several thousand year time periods based on technologies. that show up within the tool types.
Cool, thank you. And then Janine made a note, which was a good point, that just like all of the last 39 episodes of Northern Kentucky History Hour, Janine did a really nice overview of Native American Indian time periods that occurred in Northern Kentucky and then sort of also Southwest Ohio. And so that would be available from BCM's Facebook page or on the Behringer-Crawford YouTube channel. So if somebody wants to dig in a little bit more, you can do that as well. Okay, so again, I hate to just keep like rushing on, but I know we're at 7:30 and there's a couple more questions. What happens to the artifacts that you find typically?
Depends on the property owner. Technically, they belong to whoever owns the property at the time we do the dig.
Oh, okay.
So some property owners want them back.
Mm-hmm.
If the developer owns it, the property, then for the most part, they go to a museum or a historical society. Or if they don't, there isn't one, or they don't want them, University of Louisville, University of Kentucky, Western Kentucky are official curation facilities in Kentucky. So the ones that don't go anywhere else can go there. But technically, it's the landowner's decision of what happens to them.
Wow, that's really interesting. And then, so for example, I'll just use the Earth Fast house as an example. How often do you know what you're gonna find before you go? Like ever?
All right, we kind of skipped that part. So before we go out and do an archaeological survey in whatever state we work in, we have to do a background search. Every state keeps records of what archaeological sites have already been documented, and the same with buildings. And so we can go find out that information. You take a map that has your project on it, and you can go, and now we do almost all of it online. But we can go and look and see if there's something already known.
Gotcha.
Or we can look at what's around it to try to figure out what we might find. So yeah, we do usually have some kind of an idea.
I'm sure it's still surprising though, but I wanted to backtrack for just a second and remind everybody that your work at the Independence, the Kenton County Courthouse in Independence, once all their renovation is done, actually a lot of those things that were found, artifacts that were found, I think Behringer-Crawford Museum is actually going to be helping with displaying those artifacts in the building after restoration. And same for one of the excavations in Covington, is that those artifacts actually are located in Behringer-Crawford Museum. In fact, I saw them just a couple weeks ago. So it was kind of fun because I'm like, oh, I saw those on History Hour, and there they are right there in the case. So that was pretty cool. Well, I am very grateful for this. It's so much fun. My oldest son is an aspiring archaeologist, so I can't wait for him to watch this one. It'll be very cool for him. And as always, very happy to see you all. We definitely will get scheduled a couple of more. So hopefully it's already almost the end of March. So probably in May. Time just flies by, but we are so grateful. So thank you, Janine, and thank you, Doug. Glad you were with us.
Who's next week?
Next week, great question. Next week, John Middleton will be presenting about the life and very interesting history and experiences of his parents, Mary and Clyde Middleton. And so I think it's going to be a really fascinating kind of recent history of Northern Kentucky. But the Middletons were involved in everything from the creation of the Kenton County Library to obviously being elected officials. And so I think it's really going to be fascinating. So I hope you all come back next week and join us. So thank you, everyone. And in the meantime, please check out Facebook and YouTube and website, and we'll see you all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.